Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Silver Outlook. I'm Peter Kraut of the Silver Stock Investor, and I'm happy to be with David Morgan today of the morganreport.com. David, thanks for your time with us today.
Well, Peter, thanks for reaching out, and it's good to see you on camera.
Same here, David. Hopefully in person sometime soon, but traveling being what it is these days, could be some time still.
Exactly.
Just wanted to start on a bit of a lighter note. David, you graciously reached out to connect with me a little while back, maybe about a month ago, and I almost didn't take your call because I didn't recognize that number. And I said, oh, you know what, maybe it's telemarketing. Let me pick it up just to make sure. And sure enough, it was you. And I'm glad that you reached out, and I'm glad we're getting the chance to get acquainted.
Yeah, me too. And, we met indirectly at the Metals Investors Forum, and I looked at some of your stuff. I didn't have time the whole day to see it all. And I thought, I don't want to miss anything. And I've never been a know-it-all. I'm a learn-it-all. Not that you can learn any one subject entirely, but, there's things that just getting help, being part of the community, maybe your specialty is a little different than mine, and it's just a way to build a rapport. I really don't look too much at others in the industry as being competitors. I look at them as being a part of the community. And, what you do is a little different than I do. And there's people that are very extremely silver bullish, and they probably want to get everything that has to do with the silver market. So, I want to make that available to people that follow me, that there's people that write about it and have knowledge about it and may have different ideas about how to invest in it, or maybe different companies that sometimes maybe I don't know or overlook or whatever. So I just like the whole idea of reaching out and building, again, the community. You're not a competitor of mine the way I see it. And I learned something from you already, and I'm hopefully, giving you a little bit of a knowledge base as well. I certainly have read enough books on the silver market to have a pretty good idea of, my memory tests. So anyway.
Absolutely. No, I feel the same way. It's certainly a mutual way of seeing things, and again, it's certainly appreciated. David, in the past year, it's probably a huge understatement to say that the world's changed dramatically. What would you say? How would you say that's been the case for silver? What are your thoughts on that?
I think silver is in 2020 is a watershed year, and I think go out, I don't know, pick a number, 100 years in the future, and look back, and silver is still a vital element that's mandatory in certain applications. If you look back, you would say, wow, look at 2020. There was a very well-known financial elite meeting that took place in Davos, Switzerland every year, called the World Economic Forum. And in January 2020, Guggenheim's chief investment officer said that silver was his conviction trade. And during that year, over 300 million ounces of fine silver from the commercial category, the real silver market, was put into investment holdings in the ETFs. On top of that, the retail, the average investor out there that's savvy to money and what happens in the currency crisis, bought 200 million ounces worth of silver. So over half of the total silver supply was used as investment purposes in that year of clear vision. People were starting to clearly see the merits of investing in the silver market. And then we could only guess, Peter, at this time in March, where it goes from here. But my conjecture is maybe we'll see something similar again this year. And if that's the case, then we're going to see, how the Wall Street bets thing fell into the GameStop, and that spilled over into a subgroup that was called Wall Street Silver. There was this awareness campaign. A lot of people woke up to the difference between currency and money. There started to be a groundswell of basically bottom up people learning about finance, money, and monetary history, and the silver market started to gain even more momentum. And that spilled over into 2022 and 2023 when the great silver crisis arose. and all of a sudden silver couldn't be priced in paper terms. Silver people would only trade for direct wealth, cars, houses, businesses, or whatever. I'm off the edge here already, but that's the way it could go. I don't know. What I do know is that usually these markets accelerate at the end. We are in the third phase from what I can determine. That's where, 90% of the move comes in the last 10% of the time. I think we've started that in 2020. So everything that you asked me, that's my answer. Time will tell if I'm correct or incorrect.
I would concur with pretty much all of that. And, what I found interesting, I saw a recent interview of the guy who set up Wall Street Silver, the Reddit community, and he started a GoFundMe campaign to help bring awareness by advertising and so on. And within hours, like the first few hours, he had $10,000 had been raised. And then within weeks, he'd had over, I think, $130,000 had been raised. And so, they're looking to do billboards and all sorts of things. And it's true that there was a spike in February, early February, that, drove things wild for a few days. That's obviously subsided, but it's certainly interesting to see what's happening at silver bullion dealers, because it certainly hasn't subsided there. I mean, premiums are crazy. Stock is almost non-existent in a majority of products. And, I just think that physical prices are going to have to rise to start meeting what, spot prices, sorry for that, will have to start rising to meet what physical prices are trading at. It's just not a realistic disconnect anymore.
Yeah, I agree. We've seen this happen before. And the spread did get quite wide, and it did narrow over time. And it basically was the retail price started to narrow toward the derivatives price, the paper market. This time, I'm not so certain it'll happen, because we're seeing the physical, what's the true silver market, which means the commercial bar markets, getting premium on those bars. So anything to do with physical silver's got a premium on it, from the basic raw material silver to the finest government minted coin is getting a large premium on them. And this is something that says their demand is not being met by the existing supply.
Yeah, exactly. And as we both know, that's just been an outsized black swan type of addition to demand, I guess, if you could call it that, in the last few months. On top of, like we mentioned earlier, what took place in the physical market last year between ETFs and physical buying. And now, you layer on top of that the outlook for, a green future in terms of energy, in terms of transportation. And I mean, it's sort of multiplying the effect on the demand for silver. Something else that I've certainly thought, I think you probably have similar thoughts from the work I've seen that you've done, but similar thoughts about, what role silver might have to play in the future in terms of currency. And I've been thinking for a long time that, whether it's a competitor currency, amongst others, or whatever it might be, but some sort of silver-backed crypto or precious metals-backed crypto could certainly be a contender. And I think that that's something where potentially the market's massively underestimating the demand for silver for that kind of arrangement.
I agree. I am associated with the AG.Lo.1, which is a cryptocurrency backed by both silver and gold. But I think they're totally blind to it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the future, and will it go this way or not? Again, remains to be determined. But let's say that a cryptocurrencies, because there's more than one that's backed by precious metals, starts to be the direct line for the refiners. It's a ready market, and it's well distributed, because you might have, at some point, you could have millions of people that are using their digital wallets to facilitate trade in silver between let's say the United States and Mexico, or in Africa, or all these places that are unbanked. Most of these younger people will have a phone and they know how to use it for payment transactions. So a lot of them that, again, are unbanked go to these kiosks and they buy a card for their telephone service for the next month. Well, they could easily buy a card and put, half an ounce of silver in their wallet as well, or 2 ounces or 10 or whatever. So I think people are overlooking the potential. It's not that there's going to be a huge drain on commercial bars for ETFs from big investors, which of course remains certainly a possibility. It took place last year. It may and probably will take place again this year. It's more of the what we call DeFi, the not centralized, the decentralized ability for people to create their own wealth and trading and payment platforms. So no one's really awake to it right now, in my view. I mean, some are somewhat, but I don't think they really have thought through, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it could. It's certainly possible that this becomes pervasive. Now you've really got a robust market because you don't have just the, silver community that's, well less than 1% of the financial market. You now have it as a robust part of the entire, let's say, new payment system, which happens to be, cryptocurrency or decentralized finance and maybe centralized finance all working at the same time. Potential's huge. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to think about how many unbanked in Indonesia, Africa, South America there are, Mexico, and having just say 10% of them come on to a system, not necessarily one I'm referring to, but any of them that are precious metals backed. I mean, it's one of those points, I don't know if you ever heard this, Peter, or not, but the 100th monkey effect, where, it's, you can look it up on the internet. I think it's just a metaphor. I don't think it really exists. But the idea was that some monkeys in the South Sea Islands learned to wash their coconuts because of radiation, and very few picked up on it. But once it hit that tipping point of 100 monkeys, then they all did it. So they all came on board. And you do see these tipping points in the financial markets, and you see them in crowd control. You see them in a flock of birds. That one bird takes a hard left and they all follow it or whatever. So there are these things in nature. And I don't want to belabor the point, but the idea being that we're just now touching the very, very beginning of this, let's say, competitive currency situation. And we don't know what the outcome is going to look like.
That's true. It's certainly early days. And, to make parallels, it's early days, I would guess, in the, it is, like you've said, sort of, we're in the acceleration phase, I guess, in this precious metals bull market. But if you look at it and you compare gold and silver, how would you see silver versus gold at this point in this bull?
Well, the last phase of these bull markets is led by silver. And of course, we started about a year ago, March of 2020, silver hit a print of 125 to 1, 125 ounces to buy an ounce of gold. And now it takes about 66. So it's dropped. It's basically outperformed gold on a 2-to-1 basis. And that will continue, in my view. And also, if we are in the third leg up, which I believe we are, you'll see it drop to like 33 to 1. And I think that's pretty much a given because we've already been there in this bull market. But the bull market isn't over. And so it could go one half again, where you get to the classic or monetary ratio of roughly 16 to 1. And actually, I think that's what will occur. So silver will double, redouble, and double again relative to gold on a gold silver ratio basis.
Yeah, I mean, I know that from what I've read and heard, in terms of what your outlook is, you certainly see, I think, triple digit prices for silver, and I'm in that camp as well. I mean, some people think some of my targets are crazy, but I think that if you'd asked someone in the late 70s, how high can gold go? How high can silver go? and you'd said $40, $50 for silver, $800 for gold, they would have thought you were crazy at the time as well. And like you said, a lot of this comes in the last sort of 10% of the time. And it's easy to underestimate, but it's certainly something that you kind of want to prepare for. It's, I don't think, unrealistic at all, given the kind of money that we see sloshing around and the kind of impact it's having on stocks, on crypto, on all sorts of markets, real estate. We chatted about this just before this call, and real estate is going wild. And so, um, in some ways, it's not unrealistic to say sky's the limit. It doesn't mean these prices will go up there and stay there, for extended periods. But the ultimate targets are multiples of anything we're looking at currently.
Exactly. I agree.
Yeah. If we look at previous silver bull markets, some of the research that I've done shows, and this is just such basic stuff, actually. You look at what silver did in the 70s, and it was up something like 37 or 38 times. And then in the 2000s, it was up 10 times. And this is just silver itself. That is not even looking at what silver stocks do. And, it's basic math to know and understand that the stocks will leverage what the metal does. And, you look at juniors, and that will leverage what the larger producers will do. And I mean, again, I've looked at just in the 2000s, one of the biggest silver stocks did between about 2005 to 2008, did a 5 times return. This was, I think, the largest capitalization silver stock, did a 5 times return. And multiple silver juniors and smaller silver producers or developers did anywhere from 10 times up. I mean, and it's not to say that people need to take outsized risk, and they need to invest just in juniors and go for these kinds of things. But and I guess in a properly structured portfolio, if people are going to gain exposure to silver, which I believe makes sense given how undervalued it still is today, it's a question of balance. If people will say, I'm going to, have core positions, I will hold some of the larger producers, maybe some royalty companies, and then with 10, 20% of my silver allocation to silver equities, I'm going to dabble in junior explorers, and I'm going to hold at least a small basket of 4 or 5 companies. That could mean as little as a few $100, $500, maybe $1,000 per name. And one of those can just, go up like the kinds of numbers we were just talking about, and easily outpace the rest of the portfolio.
Right.
And yet the investor has taken very little risk by allocating a small amount and by holding a small basket of those names. So I think, there's certainly a place for it, and there's certainly a way to play this space without taking outsized risk. And let's dial back a second and look at where silver is today versus gold and versus inflation. And I'd like to get a bit of your thoughts on that.
Well, gold is pretty much doing its job. I mean, gold should be far higher in fiat terms to be equal to the amount of printing that's taken place already. I do think it will get there. I don't think it's getting there this year. I think we're in a trading range for probably the next 3 to 6 months. But again, we're in that last phase, or I believe we are. All indicators are that we are. So there will be an acceleration phase for both the metals. And when exactly does it take place? I don't know, but we're getting close. I really think that if I'm correct, we only have a few years left before we start to get near the ultimate top in paper prices. But we really don't know what the end looks like, because we don't know if the fiat system will be reset. It looks like it will be. So it's really hard to say, well, there'll be this many Canadian dollars or US dollars or Aussie dollars or euros or pound sterling, because what we're probably going to see is what is it in Fed coin digit terms or whatever. It's hard to determine. last thing you want to do is give up something as valuable as a precious metal for digits if you can't trust those digits purchasing power. So we're in a bit of a quandary. We don't know yet, but we'll probably be able to determine it fairly accurately. Silver is undervalued relative to gold, as I said, 125 to 1. It's only been, I think, hit once before, and very briefly. It didn't stay there very long. As I said, it would be a spike. And it's, again, outperforming gold. I think it's going to gain more momentum still because it's cheaper. It's undervalued relative to anything out there. It is a store of value, and it has so many applications in a high-tech society. I think once the education system continues, and I'm talking about, social media or one-to-one peer groups or whatever, it's not going to be the mainstream financial press at all. It won't be, anything that's in the establishment. Certainly get out there. And when someone learns that they can sell, their digital silver anywhere in the world and help fund their family back in, Argentina or whatever, that's going to be very powerful. And once that's determined by that period, it will spread rapidly. People, especially these younger people. I mean, I've given away some digital silver to a few people. I gave some to one of the people on the Wall Street Silver Forum. And, this was so simple, Peter. I mean, I just said, grab a wallet and let me know. And, like 30 seconds later, he said, here's my code, right? Which, being a gray-haired old man, I mean, I knew how to do it. And it wasn't like baffled or anything. But, if I told somebody my age to do that, well, how do I do that? Where do I go? What's the website's name again? I'm making fun of myself, but this kid's like, wow. So I copied it, got my key, bang, gave it to him, and he goes, well, thank you. And the whole thing took, and that's my point, is that we're overlooking perhaps how pervasive this could become almost overnight, because these kids are savvy to it. They don't have to, you don't have to train them. They like instantly know, oh, that wallet, this wallet, that wallet. Okay. Oh, yeah, I got that wallet. Oh, yeah, fine. I got paid it. Thank you. So we'll see. Yeah, I'm excited about it, really, because it's the one thing about the metals that's been one of the bugaboos for me earlier on, and still to this day, is, well, I believe everything you say, David. I think I should have some exposure, but I'm really worried. How do I sell it? So, well, how do I sell it? I know how to buy it, but how do I sell it? Well, as James Turk famously said, you won't, you'll spend it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, and that's he's certainly well placed to know and understand that whole system, and I think the blockchain is an amazingly underestimated technology that could certainly make all of this possible. What we can see of a potential new type of currency that will be physically backed, that people can trust, and that can change the way that we save, store value, and spend, and trade.
I agree.
Yeah. I wrote something not long ago about how silver in some ways is different from gold. I'm sure you know this, but if you look at how it was called silver is sticky money. And if you look at how silver investment and one of the simpler ways to track this is through exchange traded funds, is that if you go back about 5 years and you look at the silver holdings in these physically backed funds, and you compare that with the silver price, so you chart them, side by side or sort of one on top of the other, as the silver price would dip, the ETF holdings would sometimes dip slightly, but often just move sideways. And it's amazing how people who buy silver hang on to it, even through dips. And that's something that's actually quite different about how gold behaves. You don't get the selling when the price sells off. And so people are committed to this sector, and it just, I think, really bodes well for how much conviction people have in this space?
Well, it brings up a story in my mind. I'll try to be brief, but I was lecturing in Switzerland to some pretty high-end fund managers. So I'd say half the crowd was bankers. And I talked about both gold and silver, but primarily silver being my focus. And almost all of them kind of got in line to talk to me. And one guy came up, pretty young guy, and he said, I don't know why anyone would buy gold. I'll never forget that. I just like kind of shocked even me, I don't know what to say. But that was his conviction. Like, it's such gold is such a secondary metal to what silver's potential is.
So he meant, and he meant versus silver in that case.
Yeah, he meant that why would you spend any of your fiat on gold when you can buy silver? Basically, is what he's saying.
When was this?
Oh, geez, probably 15 years ago.
Okay.
It was,
okay.
They got to remember, I mean, you were in my shoes, nor I in yours, but,
Yep.
I never let this go to my head. I try to be a good quarterback. When things are high, don't get too high. When things are low, don't get too low. But there was a time when silver was like the best performing asset for a few years in a row. So, there was a time when the red carpet came out, not the tomatoes, right? So
Right.
you could walk on red instead of getting covered in red. So
Exactly. A recent quote comes to mind. I think it was Ray Dalio of Bridgewater, just very recently said something along the lines of, cash is trash. And I mean, we've heard that before, but he's certainly someone of note that, and given, his stature and the amount of funds that he manages, that's something for people to really, I find, they really should pay attention. When you hear something like that from someone of that stature, it's not to be ignored. And if you look at what's happened with, I mean, MicroStrategy is one, going into Bitcoin, now Tesla changing its investment policy to say not only that will they invest in crypto, but gold and precious metals ETFs are something that they're allowing themselves to invest in the future. I just think people need to, sometimes there's not that much room left between the lines to read. I mean, it's just sort of blaring out at you. And if you're willing to pay attention, it's telling us that hard assets are the place to be. So gold, especially silver these days, given how undervalued it is. I mean, gold is 17%, I think, below its all-time high from August. Silver is 50% approximately below its all-time high, which goes back to 2011. So, I mean, to find a cheaper asset, like you were saying before, good luck. And with more potential to boot. It's just simply the space to be in. I think, so little downside, so much tremendous upside. And then to be able to build a portfolio with some guidance in silver stocks to leverage those gains on top of it. Again, not necessarily with a ton of risk, maybe some calculated risk by having a properly built portfolio. I just think that's really a space that investors want to be in. And stocks are near all-time highs, setting all-time highs. Bonds are, Ray Dalio called investing in bonds a stupid trade these days. Really, to look for something of value these days, there's really not much left. It's not a tough call to make anymore.
Exactly. Well, let me just say, a little bit about our respective services. I mean, my commentary is the editorial I write. It's a big picture about the economy generally. Sometimes it's silver specific. I think last month was all in silver. Normally it's not. Normally it's like, what's going on financially, maybe the bond market or what the Fed's doing or what other countries are doing or whatever. But then the portfolio, which is what people want to know, I divided into three groups: top tier, mid tier, and speculations. I teach about 70% of your funds for stocks go into the top tier, 20% into the mid tier. And on the speculative side, I bet money can afford to lose. And then what I do, and actually, believe it or not, I have picked more companies in the speculative side that became mines than anybody else. And I'm not a geologist, but it was kind of easy in the beginning because back in the 2000s, early 2000s, all the junior miners had gone bye-bye with the exception of a very few. So these geologists or CEOs, mostly geologists that had these projects, they sold their second home, they sold their boat, they sold their second car. I mean, they did everything they had to keep that property. They'd only keep it for one reason, or because it had something on it. So that was a bit of an advantage. I just use common sense. But and what I do is, if there is a big discovery, then I have data, and I will analyze if the market is really priced. So a lot of times I have added onto a 12-cent stock at, let's say, $1.20. Sounds stupid. You've already made 10 times on your money, but if its true value is 5, then you're actually buying a different company. You're not buying a company drilling for a discovery. You found the Penasquito mine, which I did. I had Western Copper that became Western Silver. That was bought out by Glamis, and that was bought out by Goldcorp. So you ended up with Goldcorp shares, and I think it was about a 40 bagger. But don't always do that. Many are failures, and that's the benefit and the joy of being in the junior space. But you have a bit of a different approach, and that's why I wanted. I'm not trying to sell your newsletter, and you're not trying to sell mine. I think they complement each other. Sure. So I've talked plenty of what I do. Let's hear what you do, Peter.
Yeah. So Silver Stock Investor is a silver newsletter that is focused exclusively on silver. I do some similar things to what you do. I certainly provide subscribers with a market background and market outlook. I talk about things like interest rates and the Fed and what, basically what the macro picture looks like. And I'll go into different silver related topics each month, exploring different aspects of the silver market. I'll do a technical analysis of silver itself as well, the silver price and silver stocks, and where I think that means we're headed in the maybe near or medium term, to get a bit of feel for where things are going. And from there, I will typically recommend each month a couple of names, and that ranges all over from. I've got your basics for anyone who's really getting started. I've got some basic ETFs, just to have a place they can kind of dip their toe in the water without needing to understand too much. And as they get comfortable, I've got some royalty plays in silver. I've got larger producers, and then I've got mid tiers. I've got some development, and then I round out with junior explorers, and that has more names in that category, simply because, like I was saying before, people will want to have a small basket at least of juniors if they're going to play in that space. And so I think, similar allocations to what you were saying makes sense, to do something like a 70%, to the larger names, that being a core allocation, and then a smaller percentage, perhaps 20% into the developers and some developers in mid tiers. And then the juniors can be a small percent, like I was saying earlier, 10, maybe 20%, and dabble in that by spreading that across a few names. I think that there's certainly enough interest, and there's certainly enough justification for someone to be allocating to this space, to look at spending the time and a little bit of money for sure, to get some researched information about what's going on in the silver space. Your newsletter certainly is a stalwart in the space. People have been following that for the longest time. It's not for no reason that you're known as the silver guru. And you've expanded, as I know, into some gold as well, and then into some crypto alongside. And I've started this newsletter more recently. I've certainly been around the newsletter and metals and mining space for upwards of 20 years, and got this going recently as I saw what was happening. Like you were saying, we're in the third leg of silver, and I think a dedicated newsletter, research newsletter, what I'm buying with my money, what I'm doing with that, how I allocate things, made sense to offer to people interested in this space.
Good. Well, I've read it. I'm impressed. I like it, and you're doing a great job. I'm glad we reached out. Is there anything else we should talk about on this?
I think we've certainly done the rounds and covered recent recent activity and where things we both think are headed. And I think for today we've probably covered enough ground. We certainly, if you're up to it, I wouldn't mind checking in, perhaps every couple of months and do this again.
Absolutely. I think we should. So thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to our next meeting. And as you said earlier, I hope there will be a gathering that we can actually meet face to face. I will say, totally off topic, but I do want to close out that I really value the interpersonal relationships more than I used to. I think I took them for granted a little bit. I don't think I did. But now, since I've been kind of deprived of seeing my daughters or, not only family members, just friends, I have good friends that are leaving the area, and we had a kind of a goodbye dinner. And I really felt more connected because the opportunity isn't there much anymore. So maybe I sound a bit corny or like a grumpy old man or something, but I really mean it. I think that, we being philosophical, we know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And a lot of that, the best things in life are free. I used to hate that saying. I love it now because it's true. I've learned over years that it is true. Friendship is priceless. You can't put a amount of silver on that. And so I guess that's what I'm saying. But so really from the heart, I hope that we are getting through this illness stuff and we get back to something where we are able to interact like we're supposed to do or meant to do.
Well said, David. I again certainly appreciate your time, and I appreciate your reaching out and our discussion today and exchanging ideas and views and outlooks. And we look forward to doing this shortly again.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Peter.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.